It's my great pleasure to once again be joined by Konstantin Samoilov, one of the most respected, one of the most unique voices on YouTube, who is talking about what is happening inside Russia. And what we have been predicting now for several years in these conversations is coming to pass. A precipitous slide towards authoritarianism, and not the culmination of the war, I fear, but Putin marshalling all the resources of Russia in order to continue his pointless and vicious war. Konstantin is, of course, outside Russia, but he does maintain connections there and, of course, watches and consumes a huge amount of the very best information. So we are bringing to you a unique voice and a unique insight into what's happening in Russia. Before we get into this, I recommend that you follow Konstantin, his output, his materials, give him support for his work, and of course, if you are also minded to support Silicon Curtain, please do. All of those links are in the description. Now let's jump in. Konstantin, welcome back.
Jonathan, thank you for having me. It's fantastic to be back. I enjoy our conversations a lot. You are a very intellectual person to explore this topics that I can't really explore with anyone else except for you and probably a couple more people in the world. So
A handful of
thank you very
people.
much.
Yeah, yeah, it's a privilege. It really is.
Under five, I would say there are under five people in the world who I can discuss these topics with and enjoy doing that.
And I'm delighted that there are those five. It would be a very lonely place if you couldn't talk about these with anybody else. But I also think they are incredibly important for a broader audience, and that's why I'm so grateful for these conversations. Let's talk about the internet, but I want to come at it from another angle because everyone's talking about apps being banned, the internet shut down, etc. We've got lots of videos of people who are, dare I say it, inconvenienced and their lifestyles are a little disrupted. But actually, this makes sense to me. I know that what's happening feels like chaos, but it makes sense. And it's something that I've known since the 1990s, when people tried to persuade me back to Russia in the early 2000s to start businesses, to come and live and whatever. My answer was always the same. Eventually, someone will come, and whatever you own, whatever you've built, whether it's a business, a house, a community, someone will come and steal it and kick it down, and you will be lucky to escape with your life. And I was largely not believed, or people said no, it's changed. What we are seeing is exactly playing out, and that is in the absence of rule of law, where a population does not have rights. And we know that in Putinist Russia, rights are not granted to the population rather than privileges, and in certain circumstances, a tolerance. Through the first part of the Putin regime, there was a certain tolerance of people saying and doing certain things within boundaries. But these are not rights enshrined in law, these are privileges. Now, with the shutting down of the internet, we are seeing privileges revoked. And I think this is going to go a lot further even than this. What's your take on this story? The internet, privileges, rights, and the sort of squeals of protest we're seeing, especially from population in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Ekaterinburg, and other places.
Let me take a few steps back into the past. I moved to Moscow back in 2004, late 2000, long time ago, over 20 years ago. And I've met many expats, foreigners living and working in Moscow. And back then, the economy was growing, businesses were flourishing. There were lots of money in Russia and very little of the KGB control and the state control, in general. And there were thousands and thousands of expats. There was an expat community which I joined, and I met quite a few of British Americans, the Europeans. And I remember talking to a few of them, and I was asking if they moved to Russia permanently. and they would obtain permanent residency. You know, was normal for me. I went to the USA, and my choice would be to obtain permanent residency, right? And everyone looked at me, and depending on the level of their politeness, some just looked at me, smirking, and some just would start laughing out loud, like, I would say something funny. None of them had plans, future plans with Russia, inside Russia. Okay. Each one of those people had a return ticket with open date. Back then, you could buy an airfare and a plane ticket with open date, and they were ready to leave at any time. Okay, so they were just like you, Jonathan. They knew very well what was going on, even back in 2004, when, to be honest with you, the sky was pretty clear about Russia with few clouds. But those who were in the know, they knew that the clouds would thicken and the storm would come one sooner or later. And it took 20 years. Okay, then I know quite a few YouTubers. I started my YouTube channel when I was still living in Russia, and I was talking. There was a community of English-speaking YouTubers, and I met personally most of them, and a lot of them were praising Russia, and to this day they are praising Russia, how well it is to live in Moscow, how great Moscow is, how great Russia is. Okay, and I had one of those YouTubers visited me in Tashkent. He was, you know, going on his business, and then we just met for a coffee. And he's a guy who a lot of people know is very, very big foreign blogger based in Russia. And I'm not gonna I'm not gonna say his name, okay?
Don't
But
reveal the name, no.
so the guy we were talking, and I asked him. I said, "Look, what do you really think is happening in Russia?" And that was 2024. Okay, it wasn't yesterday. It was some time ago. So now you say that you observe everything is quiet and nice, and what do you really think? He looked at me. He said, "What do I really think?" He goes, "I look not too far from Vnukovo airport, and I have a suitcase packed. Something happens, in 15 minutes, I'm out of my apartment. I'm ready to forfeit everything I have here, which is not much, and just get to the airport on the, any plane out of Russia. That's what I really think." That explains what's going on in Russia. And then you knew back then, he knows now, okay, and that's what the true situation in Russia is. Now, concerning banning internet, I saw it coming. I made videos and live streams right shortly after the start of the war. They were talks of banning YouTube and banning internet back then, but everyone laughed at them in Russia. Oh, come on, they'd never do that. Yeah, that's what I heard so many times when I asked Russians, "What do you think? Is there a threat?" "Oh, come on, are you crazy? They'll never do that." Now, it's out there on YouTube. In March of 2022, I made live streams, and I dedicated some of the live streams to this particular topic. Well, guess what? 2026, they are doing it. And it turns out that internet, which basically internet is access to free information. In Russia, it's turned out to be a privilege, not a right. And you know what? You're the first person who's brought this up. That's fantastic observation. Is this a right or a privilege? I think it's our right. But in Russia, it turns out it's a privilege that the state gives to people. The state decides what they have access to and what they don't have access to. Okay, they can take that privilege at any time.
Well, the thing is, I mean, it seems to me that everything is a privilege. There are no rights in Russia. The difference or the distinction is that if you were in the provinces, you knew that, and you've been the subject of that now since, the start of the full-scale invasion. because you could be subject to, verborka, you could be subject to having your body taken and destroyed by the state, and no one's going to come and rescue you. The distinction was that the urban population were granted the privilege of exemption from this. But actually, the rules count across the board. It's just that those with privileges tend not to see them as privileges, they see them as rights. My argument here is that if it starts in the provinces and how minorities are treated, and the poor and the powerless are treated, well, eventually everyone can be treated in that way because there is no basis in law. And I think this is why this is the sort of mental framework I have. It's the internet today, but actually it could be the lives of the people in the urban centres tomorrow. And we're going to come to that in a minute because there are plenty of signs that that is coming too. But it's curious, those who exist within these privileges tend to think that it makes them untouchable and that somebody else is subject to, that extreme brutality. But unfortunately, eventually, when it suits the regime, it can inflict that on everyone.
Most Russians that I, spoke to over the years, they were living in what I call informational bubbles that they built for themselves. And what you are talking about, this oppressions, you know, crimes against people, they started happening even before the war. The difference is the scale. They did not happen on mass scale back then, but then the scale has been increasing, and now it concerns most Russians, all Russians. Okay, internet, and you're right, it's just a part of it. Mobilization is well, internet is actually a huge part of it. Okay, mobilization, internet, and private property laws. Okay, there's three pillars that are being have been taken away from Russians. So Russians have been living in informational bubbles, and their motto was, "I don't know anything, and I don't want to know because it hurts when I start learning the truth. It doesn't concern me. Yes, I understand it concerns other people, but it doesn't concern me. I'm just a little man or woman. I'm not a threat to the state, so the state won't do anything to me. Okay, I don't protest. I agree with everything, and I mind my business. Well, not any longer. That finally, the state has finally came and started bursting the informational bubbles from the outside. Knock, knock. Knock. Who's there? That's me, the state, the KGB. Well, I'm not going to open the door for you. Oh, yes, you will. Boom, the door is gone.
It isn't. It's. I think what a lot of people don't understand is that not only do all privileges come from the state, but all resources come from the state. If you are no longer compliant and obedient and loyal to the state, well, actually, they can remove everything. And this is all coalescing with the topic we're going to come to next, which is mass hidden mobilization. There's lots of debate around whether Russia is going to mobilize more to keep the war going. In my mind, there's no doubt whatsoever. Putin is not somebody to suddenly say, well, do you know what? This didn't work out so well. Well, let's pack our bags and go home. I mean, that's not happening. It's only going to get worse. He's a one-trick pony. He's got one gear, and that is escalate, escalate, escalate. He's not strategically intelligent. He doesn't think economically. So for him, it's just keep piling it on. But that's becoming more and more difficult. So the internet, it seems to me, and many Western commentators, I think we briefly discussed this in our last conversation, many Western commentators immediately interpret the internet shutdown as, he's afraid of a coup, he's afraid of this, he's afraid of Ukrainian drones. I don't think those are the primary motivators. Yes, they're a motivation, but they're not the significant ones. I think what Putin is doing is creating options for himself. Options, whether he is going to scale up the war or scale it down, back down to how it was, in the long war prior to 2022. He's creating the circumstances whereby he can lock everything down, everybody down. He can lock all the money down. We've seen tests of the banking system going down. He wants the circumstances to be able to control the situation so he has freedom of decision making. My guess is he's going to scale up, but that may be contingent on what's happening in the world to do with Iran, etc., oil prices, and so on. But that's where I think it's kind of going. That also means we need to look at what else is the state doing in order to potentially fuel a mass mobilization. And there are several things which you list them in a minute. I mean, one is going to businesses and educational institutions and imposing a levy, saying you're going to have to now give over 2%, as I think happened in Dresden. You're going to have to give 2% of your workforce or your student population. That is the levy. You choose how you do it, but this is starting to appear very much like um, I can say Game of Thrones or Hunger Games. I mean, this is exactly how that is playing out. But shutting down the internet also creates another circumstance, which I think those who've never been in Russia won't really understand. But essentially, you create a set of laws which allow you to criminalize a portion of the population. So we're now seeing people getting stopped by the roadside. Show me your phone, show me your apps. Are you running a VPN? Are you running apps? Well, this is a great tool. Now imagine you get fined here, for doing something illegal, looking at a phone while you're driving. When you pay a fine, you might challenge it in court. There's a law, there's a process. What's going to happen in Russia? You have your phone checked by a Gaishnik and a traffic cop, and you've got, Telegram installed, or you've got a VPN installed. Well, we know what's going to happen next. You're heading to a barracks. You're heading to the Vojenkomat. This is a great way to start pulling the urban population into the war, labeling them as having broken the law. Everybody else is going to go, well, there's no smoke without fire. They've done something wrong. I've done nothing wrong. I don't know. Am I being paranoid here, or is this one of the mechanisms by which the mass hidden mobilization is going to happen?
You started asking the question with that Russian state explains the massive shutdown of internet with making lives of Russians safer, so that Ukrainians drones, won't be able to hit targets inside Russia. Well, it's really easy to check. The state is obviously lying because they've shut down internet, but the drones keep flying. And it doesn't affect them whatsoever, okay? So, and this is what I call the mad circus. Instead of saying, okay, well, we made a mistake, we shut down internet, the drones keep on flying, they keep on shutting down internet, okay? And what really amazes me even more is that Russians, regular people, they keep on buying it. You know, do they truly believe that or they just pretend? I don't know. But anyway, I've downgraded my opinion of Russian people greatly since the start of the war. Okay,
The
they
fact
keep
is, we
on
won't
buying that.
know because they're not going to say what they believe publicly because the risks are too high. And we know the propaganda system exists not to instill belief, but to give you a bunch of phrases that you can repeat in order to show your loyalty to the state. So we won't know. Russians are a quantum system. You know, if you look, you're going to get a different answer than the real one. We just can't know what people really believe, what they really discuss in their
Something,
kitchens.
something tells me, my gut feeling is that a lot of Russians actually believe what Russian state tells them. Of course, some, perhaps a lot, question, but some, a great deal of Russians, they believe without thinking, because for some reason they've lost ability to think critically.
But we know that's
Now,
not confined to Russians. I mean, we have Trump, we have Brexit, we have all sorts of stuff that doesn't make any logical sense in the modern world, and yet people don't
now
expend the brain power on it.
let's expand our borders a little bit. I believe something happened in Russia. Someone threw a seed of virus that stops people from thinking critically. Okay, and then that virus is spreading to other countries as well. Okay, but going back to
I'm glad
Russia,
you said it. Yeah, it's an export. Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm seeing many countries. Well, some countries are taking Russia's footsteps, following Russia's path, you know, to the last step. Anyway, going back to Russia, I'm gonna share a theory that I don't speak of much, and I will be soon on my channel, but you are the first one to hear. Now, there has been a great deal of um, oppression, uh, taking regular people's rights away, right? And at first, it started with changing laws, transforming the legislation base in Russia. And it started pretty much at the start of the war, okay? Because if you remember, at the start of the war, first few days, everyone spoke freely. Everyone called the special military operation the war, its real name, and no one was prosecuted. Now, March 2nd, that was the first day, the Prosecutor General's office issued a statement in all newspapers, a reminder to Russians to follow the laws, not to spread propaganda, and if they lie and go against what the Ministry of Defense official information says, then that be prosecuted. And right after, they started with making, creating these two new laws, spreading fakes on military and spreading fakes. I believe second law was spreading fakes about personnel of Russian institutions working abroad, something like that. Now, since then, they've transformed the laws tremendously. Now, it was never hidden. It was always out there in public, only in fine print. And the public has not cared much in Russia. Okay, so their freedoms and rights were taken away from them right under their nose, and they kept silent. Well, what's happening right now is absolute lawlessness, lack of law, lawlessness. I'm sorry, what's this English word? How do you say it right? Lawlessness,
Lawlessness, that's it.
lawlessness. Yes,
Беспредел.
the
Is that the,
bespredel Rubicon has been passed, crossed. Okay, and that's the point of no return is somewhere there, left behind. Now, what Russian state is trying to do is not only keep people from communicating and force everyone into a state-designed app called Max that the state has total control over, and it's a surveillance tool, basically. Their goal is even bigger. They're trying to cut horizontal ties between people. They're trying to bring people back into the 19th century when they used pigeon mail. Not regular mail, because regular mail is not functioning in Russia. Okay, and that's a tool of theft, whoever is in charge. Okay, they steal a lot of money every year, and it's
that
been
hasn't changed. Yeah,
accepted.
that yeah. I mean,
No,
I
no,
have an
no. That's
interesting story about that. We once sent a little parcel of gifts to someone with a postcard in there, and someone told us, write a postcard out and list what you've got in the parcel because that will discourage someone from stealing. So the parcel arrives, the most valuable item is taken, and someone has, in a red pen, gone to the postcard and, marked out the
that's.
stolen item, repackaged, sent it on. Yeah, you can't make it
I
up.
also have. Well, I have quite a few stories with Russian post, but the funniest one was I Rostov-on-Don, a post office not too far from my residence, my home in Rostov, and I dropped by this little office, and there are two very friendly older women sitting there, smiling, and I asked them I'd like to send a parcel to the USA, some gifts, and they look at me like, sure, you can do that, but we don't recommend you, but it's up to you. You will take your parcel. I said, well, why do you don't recommend? I said, well, the chance, it's 100% chance it won't make it there. You can send it, but it won't make it there. I said, well, what's going to happen to it? I said, well, now it's going to go from Rostov, from our office, all the way to the customs office in Sheremetyevo, where it's going to be put on the plane, and it's going to get lost somewhere in the way, 100%. And another lady looks at her and at me, and she goes, well, might even get lost in this office. And then they start laughing. I said, well, ladies, thank you for warning me. Okay. So that's my personal
That's it.
story.
That's it. If they think it's going to get stolen further down the line, of course they're
Yeah,
thinking,
might
well,
as well be
we might
stolen.
as well steal it first,
Yeah, might as well be stolen here, you know.
That is a zero
Uh,
trust society. And that seemed to me
yes.
one of the almost successes of the early 2000s, sort of prior to 2012, is a little bit of trust between some individuals. Not much, not what you'd see in, say, Ukraine, where the trust quota is well, it's not always high, but it's high enough to create some kind of cohesion and resistance. But it started to improve. But now you're saying it's going backwards. And in fact, there's a state policy to try to break up relationships, which essentially comes down to trust between people.
Um, Trust started building up, and it all started with the middle class. Middle class was born in Russia, and it started. Middle class is the pillar of any free society because people have opportunity not to get money from the state, not to get paid, but to earn by creating some kind of products or services, by adding value. Okay, and once they do it, it's honest. Okay, honest earning, earnest business, and they pay taxes, but then they're well educated, and they feel they have a right to hold the state accountable. Okay, we create value, we pay taxes. Now you have to tell us how you spend those taxes. And if we don't like it, well, you know what? We're going to replace you. We're going to put new officials. We're going to elect new people and so forth. So the middle class started growing in Russia, and that's where the good changes came from. Middle class doesn't exist in Russia anymore. Okay. First thing Putin did, he destroyed middle class. And it started before the war, by the way. It started 16th, 17th, after the annexation of Crimea. But anyway, going back to internet, what the Russian state is trying to do is trying to fragment people. So the people don't, they will still speak to each other, okay? But the government wants them to have regular wired phones. Obviously, they're going to be eavesdropped on, okay? And they want them to go and talk to them face to face. How many people can you go and talk face to face in a day? Okay, just one or two, three perhaps. Whether if you have Telegram or WhatsApp or any other messenger, modern messenger, you know, you can talk to 100 people. You can organize groups. You can manage groups. That the state doesn't like that, so they're trying to fragment people. I call it destroying horizontal ties between people. And basically, they're going even further because they're not just destroying, banning messengers, banning Telegram, WhatsApp, and everything else, leaving Max. They're taking the internet away from Russians. They're destroying the core of society right now because most businesses use internet. Businesses are closing doors by tens of thousands every week. Okay, I know the inside from the Ministry of Industry and Trade. They have stopped giving real numbers of business closures every month. The statistics was available. Now it's still there, but the numbers are crooked. Before they were giving real numbers because, it wasn't alarming. Okay. Now it's a big problem, and they have an order to conceal the true information. They're trying to transform the society and put people back into the barracks, just as you said. And it's so obvious right now. They don't even make excuses. Before, Russian state was trying to put the good mask while doing bad things. Now they've stopped doing it. There are no explanations. Yesterday I learned that they're just rumors, but I think that's going to happen. They're not going to hold a May 9th parade. And they're not gonna explain it in any way. Okay, before it was the holy cow of the entire Putin's regime. The parade, the memory, and all of that. That's what we live for. And 2025, it was like that. In 2026, no parade, no explanation, nothing. They don't find it necessary to make excuses, to explain in some way, okay? They're killing the cows by, what, tens of thousands in Novosibirsk, and farmers come to the Minister of Agriculture, who promised everyone to keep their cows intact, and they come, and he doesn't even speak to them. He runs away, okay? And then he just runs away behind cops' backs, and cops arrest those who come to speak to him. So there is no explanation anymore. Jonathan, there is a very odd a bunch of events going on in Russia right now, and I have a feeling, I have not heard it anywhere, okay, but I have a feeling that Putin is being framed. A grand game of setting him up has started, okay? To steal messenger apps from Russians is one thing, but to steal the internet so the shops can't take credit card payments, it's completely another thing. I mean,
It's
you can,
self-destructive to an extraordinary degree. Yeah.
and it's not necessary, unnecessary self-destruction. Okay. And I started thinking, now I've seen this situation before with my own eyes. Now, there were two events in history that I witnessed, and one event I just read, and I did a little bit of research. When Khrushchev was taken down, similar events had happened in Soviet Union. About a year before, agriculture started being destroyed. And then basically when Khrushchev was ousted from the office, it was basically close to famine in the USSR. And that was one of the reasons they used to, remove him from his post. Okay. The KGB was in charge of the operation, and now the archives are open. And everyone can double check. Perhaps they closed it again, but they were open at some point. Then similar situation was happening before the coup in 1991, and a very similar situation was happening in one of the Central Asian countries, which I'm not going to name here. Okay, but it happened in 2016 when a certain president he died, and then new president came in, and things magically changed, and his rating, shot to the stars. And I was talking to a guy from that Central Asian country, and he traveled to Moscow, and he was absolutely overwhelmed. He said, "Look, in Moscow, I just saw the very same things happening in our country back in 2015 and 2016. The very same things, okay? Same signature." So, and I started thinking about that. It is possible that Putin is being set up. That situation will get so bad that some savior of Russia will step up and say, okay, you know what? That's enough. He's out of the office. Where is he? Well, he died. His heart stopped or whatever. He's dead. And I'm going to save Russia. Okay, so we might be seeing an upper, this plot in the making.
So
So
the idea is you make
something to
things
think about.
so bad, so irrational, you upset so many people that when you have a reset, they embrace whoever is coming on board as a kind of
Absolutely.
savior. Yeah.
And they
Not
blame
yeah,
Putin for that,
blame
for
Putin for
things
that.
getting so bad.
I mean,
Yes,
it's
yes.
not
Well,
quite the same, but it's a little like, Putin was nominated by Yeltsin to be president. That we can only imagine what was happening behind the scenes and the coercion and the planning that went into that. But he was a nobody and he was a fairly grey figure and he was not an impressive orator. He didn't cut an impressive physical figure either. So they had to create a mystique around him. They had to create the idea of a sort of, call it a savior complex, as it were. So, of course, apartment buildings were bombed throughout Russia. There is credible allegations that that was planted by the FSB. So you manufacture a crisis, you manufacture a sense of hysteria, you also manufacture a savior, and that, I guess, that's what you're hinting at here.
I am. I'm telling. I'm not hinting. Okay. There are signs. One of the signs. Let's just try to break it down real quick. What they're doing in Novosibirsk is actually unbelievable.
I was
They
going to come to that.
are.
That was my last topic, but it ties in, you think, with the plot.
They're destroying independent, small independent farmers. And the thing is, if we look at and think of a reason, we don't find a reason. They say foot and mouth disease,
Yeah,
okay,
sure. Yeah,
or
that was one of the
yeah,
allegations,
sure,
but
yes.
yeah.
But the thing is, if yeah, sure happens, an outbreak happens, then there are certain authorities within the government, the agency, within the Agency of Agriculture, that monitors the health of livestock. And if an outbreak happens, there is a procedure. They don't hide it. It's happened before. They're open about it. They say, okay, yeah, sure happened. The foot and mouth disease, that's what we're doing. We quarantine. We go in, and that's the paperwork, and that's the signatures, and this is
You
according to the
test and you
federal
do
law.
stuff.
It
Yeah.
has, yeah, we have to do it. Okay. Now they're not doing it. They come in, they don't identify themselves, they anger the farmers, they don't show any papers, they don't take any tests. They proclaim, oh, you know what, your livestock, your cows are sick with what? We're not going to tell you, but we're going to slaughter it right now and we're going to burn. And then it happens on a massive scale and no one tells people what's going on. The thing is, imagine there's a huge giant, very strong, mean giant, and it's sleeping. And a little guy comes to a giant with a needle and pokes it with a needle. And it hurts a little bit, but then it angers the giant. It doesn't hurt him. It doesn't, stop him from waking up and attacking. It doesn't immobilize him. Okay, it just angers him, and that's exactly what's happening in Novosibirsk. People in Novosibirsk are irate. In all over Russia, angry. Even in Rostov, that's when I talk to people. They start, "What's going on in Novosibirsk?" They ask me because I know better. Okay, they don't know, but they're concerned. I was taking a taxi ride here in Tashkent, and a cabbie was asking me, what the hell? What do you think of Novosibirsk? Are they crazy in the Kremlin? Okay. So you see, this even cabbie in Tashkent is blaming the Kremlin. Who is in the Kremlin? Putin, obviously. Okay. He doesn't know what's going on. Doesn't he see what's going on? And you know what? Probably he doesn't. Probably he has no clue what's going on in Novosibirsk. He's not told. Or he's told a different story. Okay. And why?
But this is
Why
it.
they're doing what they're doing.
Why choose Novosibirsk? Why choose Siberia? Going back to the 1960s, it was well known that the further you get from Moscow, actually, I won't call it liberal, but the further you get from Moscow, that sort of iron grip of the Kremlin starts to diminish. And you do in Siberia, I believe, have a slightly heightened sense of being a little freer than in Moscow. And that was certainly true in the Soviet Union. So it stands to reason that if you're going to want to get people to rise up, and indeed there was a protest when a governor was prosecuted, removed, and you saw, extraordinary scale of protests a number of years ago. So if you are going to try to foment this or stick a needle somewhere in the rump of the oxen who won't move, well, you're going to choose the bit that's most tender, the bit that's most likely to react.
I
That
have
is
one word for you,
Siberia. Yeah.
Jonathan. I have one word. Akademgorodok. Do you know the story of Akademgorodok?
I don't know.
Dissent. The story of dissent.
Mhm.
Okay, in the 60s, when there was Ottepel, the young
The sort of
scientists
Thor,
were
the
so
Khrushchev's
upset
Thor.
in
Yeah.
Moscow.
Mhm.
They were so upset with the things in the science being run by the state that they decided to leave Moscow. A large group just left and established an a department of the Academy of Science in Novosibirsk. They called it Akademgorodok, and they wanted to run it as the future society, fair, just, away from Moscow. Okay, the most liberal young scientists came there, and then for about 20 years they were trying to build this new shining city on the hill, on top of the hill, inside the Soviet Union. Okay, and that just not in terms of science and education and the projects, but in terms of how they organized their living. They tried to take a great deal of self-governance. They tried to build apartments for themselves using their own supervision. They didn't build typical Soviet apartment blocks. They built the buildings that they designed, not with their own hands. They built, but they brought in building organizations and gave them the designs and so forth. So this is the cradle of dissent historically in Russia. And if you want to start something, start it in Novosibirsk, okay? Because the history is still alive and the memories are still alive there. And I think this is exactly where they started. It started with Novosibirsk, and now it's spreading because it's not just in Novosibirsk province. The livestock slaughtering is happening in the neighboring provinces and in the central Russia now. It has spread, not on the scale of Novosibirsk, but it's happening. Okay, so what are we seeing here? Let's ask a question.
Well, the challenge, of course, but it does fit with all sorts of things, is that if it is not a genuine organic protest, I mean, it's quite possible they'll lose control of it if it does happen. Um, but it also sounds like there's a clique or there's a group who have a replacement ready. They have a vision of how they're going to take over power, how they're going to recenter power in Moscow. They just need the periphery to start the fire so that their plot, their coup, etc., can play out.
They
That
will come up
is
as the
dangerous
saviors
as
of
well.
Russia.
Uh, and that doesn't fix anything because we've been here before. I mean, people are going to find this sort of odd, but actually, Yeltsin was engineered into position in a similar way. And the battle around Ostankino, that really was pivotal in allowing Yeltsin to take over. Well, I hear from several sources that that was engineered. So
Uh,
this idea of organic,
I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm
no,
saying
but
that they will portray themselves as the saviors
they
of
will.
Russia.
And
Okay,
they'll
and that's
portray it as a
exactly what's
natural
going to happen.
event. They'll say, ah, there's been
Yes,
some great natural revolution, coup, whatever. But actually, the planning, it has deep, deep roots.
someone will come out just like it happened in 91, and in all TV channels they'll say, you know what? We are such and such, and we have just received, we've been the servants of the people since, 1917, whatever, for a long time, all our lives. It's all we've done. With the special services, we've served people, and we just received new intelligence data. And it shows us there's been a traitor inside Russia, and betrayal goes all the way on top. And, look at this, the cows in Novosibirsk, internet, it doesn't make any sense. Why would people, now, who made that order? this person right here. That's a criminal order. And then they'll come up with tons of pieces of evidence like that they're fabricating now. Okay. And they will ask one question: Russians, rise up. Are you with us? Would you like to save Russia? And by the time Putin probably will be dead. Okay. They'll nominate someone as a new savior. But of course, I'm not going to say Russia
No.
is going to be a new dictator in the making, and
Yeah,
Russia is
that's
going
it. A
to
new
another
liberal
circle, you know.
liberal dictator,
Yeah.
the new circle of hell, etc. I mean, they might even use the 5 points of Ilya Rimeslo because that starts to make more sense if such a, trial tests are being carried out for it. They're not going to want to go launch straight into this coup. They're going to want to do some sort of tests or prodding. They're going to want to use things like Rimeslo to sound out various people, see their reactions to it. They're sending up a trial balloon. I think this has a lot of credibility to it as a piece of speculation. I find it very plausible, actually, and
It's
that
a theory, still a
yeah,
theory, but you know, I think it has a right to exist.
and I think crucially for Ukraine, they hopefully will learn from history. They'll hopefully learn from the first revolution, where the liberal prime minister who took over didn't end the First World War, and that sort of consigned his administration to absolute failure, ceding to the Bolsheviks, who had the slogan "Peace, Bread, Land," which was appealing. They're hopefully going to not make the same mistake as Kerensky. They will see that they have to end the war in Ukraine to consolidate their own power. So I don't mind if Russia descends into a new circle of hell, because actually it won't be as bad for the population as what's going on now, and they will have to end the war against Ukraine.
It will, and you know, I started this conversation with saying that it's very intellectually pleasing, always intellectually pleasing talking to you. And now you're the only person who sees that parallel between 1917. Now, as a Russian, as a person who was born and raised in the USSR and indoctrinated, okay, guess what the first things they taught us at school were? At grade one: Decrет о мире, Decrет о земле. Okay, so the land to the peasants. Basically, when Bolsheviks staged the coup, Vladimir Lenin signed first two executive orders. The first was to stop the war, and the second was to give land to the peasants. Now, both sound wonderful, and that they sounded wonderful to me to as a child. And it's land to people who work on that land. What can be better? Okay, what can be more just? And peace. What can be better than peace? Of course, of course. I had no clue, and until recently, I didn't even know that the conditions of Decree Tamiri, the order decree of peace. Okay, so basically, the Germans couldn't win over Russia. They couldn't score a victory, and they they decided to, stage a revolution inside, and basically everything that Russia had taken from Germany militarily, that it gave back, and some. That's what Decreta Miri is, and
Mm.
I think a very similar thing will happen when Putin is out and a new so-called savior or whatever, whoever comes next, that's the same thing will happen. The first thing he will say, Russia needs peace. We're
Mm.
tired of the war. Who started the war? Has he delivered? Has he done anything? Do you know how many Russians died? And people will say, of course we don't know. How many? 10,000? No, 1,300,000 or something like that. And everyone was like, would be like,
Oh,
what? Oh my God,
they
we didn't
didn't tell
know.
us. No one
Well, they
told.
didn't tell us. Yes. And then please forgive me for being emotional, but I
Mm.
can see it happening.
No, yeah, yeah.
And that they will say that must be stopped. And if, it must be stopped at any cost. Those lands, let's give them back to Ukraine or whatever, things like that.
And
So anyway,
Putin will
we're
be
just,
declared a foreign agent. This is going to be the
of
ultimate irony.
course,
They will say
of
Putin was
course,
acting on behalf of a foreign power,
traitor.
maybe even President Trump. I mean, it'll get absurd. It'll get mad to a degree no one's ever seen. To quote Trump, no one's ever seen this level of madness. But they'll say, no, no, he was a foreign agent.
Yes. I personally think they'll declare him the English agent.
That would be the ultimate insult. That would be the ultimate insult for him personally, but that would be deliciously ironic, yeah.
Yes. So, but of course, we're speculating here, okay? But let's just, I want everyone to mark our words down, and we'll see what happens in the end of the year. How the situation will unfold.
We will fill out the scorecard, the bingo card, as it were. Maybe I'll design a bingo card of what's going to happen. But lots to think about here, and it starts to draw some of the threads that look like chaos together into something potentially coherent. Konstantin, thank you so much. This has been, I think, one of the most thrilling conversations I think we've had. Hopefully, the audience will get as much value from it as certainly I have. And your work is massively appreciated, and your friendship as well. So thank you for coming on.
Jonathan, thank you very much. Before we sign off, I'd like to make a little announcement. To everyone, I'm inviting Jonathan to be a guest on my channel, and hopefully we will upload the video this coming weekend.
Fantastic. I look forward to that. It'll be a completely different experience having the questions fired at me and not the reverse. But yeah, hopefully people enjoy this and enjoy that conversation as well. And we will share links to it. For now, though, thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Khartiia is a Ukrainian corps operating around Kupiansk, which is a critical area of the front. Now, this campaign won't be for everybody. It is a kinetic campaign in that we are crowdsourcing here for funds to buy vampire drones, 15 in fact. 5 of those have already been achieved in this campaign, but we are looking to scale this up to get the full amount of 40,000 dollar US. That's going to Dzyga's Paw that are handling this. This is an incredibly important campaign. There are many creators who are taking part in this. My view is that it's not enough at this point just to help Ukraine to survive. It's not enough just to invest in humanitarian causes. Not everyone's going to be comfortable with this, but they have to remove the invaders from their lands. To do that, they need the skills, the munitions, the weaponry to achieve that. This is where these vampire drones come in. So please, this isn't a full polished promo. I'm still working on that, but the campaign launches today. Please do check it out and, of course, help in any way that you can.